Imagine waking up alone in the middle of a dark forest, your heart pounding as a cold wind whispers through the trees. You think you're safe, until you discover a second tent, one you never pitched, standing silently nearby. Footsteps crunch behind you, but when you turn, there's nothing there. A cigarette you never smoked appears in your bag. And the chilling voice that calls your name from the shadows. What would you do when the line between reality and nightmare disappears? This isn't just a story. It's a nightmare that came true. Are you ready to face what lurks in the dark? If you've ever camped alone deep in the woods, you know the feeling. That moment after the sun drops, and the trees stretch like dark fingers into the night sky. When the silence becomes so thick, it presses on your ears. That's exactly what Daniel Moore was chasing. He wasn't some survivalist or thrill seeker. Daniel was a 29-year-old freelance graphic designer who spent most of his life behind a laptop in his Portland apartment. After a tough breakup and months of burnout, he decided to get away. No phone. No notifications. Just himself and the forest. He found the perfect spot online. A guy in a camping forum mentioned an unnamed clearing in northern Washington, near the border. Quiet. Secluded. No rangers. Just trees and sky. That's all Daniel needed to hear. The last hour of the drive was brutal. Gravel roads, potholes, and endless turns that made him lose track of direction. His GPS cut out 15 minutes before he arrived. He followed landmarks the Reddit post had described. A rusted mailbox. A bent road sign. A giant dead tree split like a claw. By the time he reached the clearing, the sun was bleeding out behind the trees. He parked his Subaru just off the path and stepped into a quiet that felt like stepping underwater. No traffic. No birds. Just the soft creak of branches above. He set up camp fast. A simple tent. A fold-out chair. A small fire pit. He heated up noodles on a propane stove and cracked open a beer. The stars came out, slow and sharp, one by one. And then the silence got heavier. Daniel didn't notice it at first. He had downloaded a few podcasts to fall asleep to, and he lay back in his tent listening to one about unsolved disappearances. Ironic, he thought, halfway through the episode. That's when it happened. Crunch. He sat up. Crunch. Crunch. Footsteps. Human footsteps. Slow. Unhurried. Coming from the trees. From the side of the clearing that his campfire no longer lit. He held his breath. The steps stopped. Right outside the thin nylon wall of his tent. His heart pounded so loud he thought whoever was outside might hear it. He waited. 10 seconds. Then 20. A full minute. Nothing. Finally, he reached slowly for the zipper. In one swift motion, he opened the flap and peeked out. There was no one. Just trees. The faint crackle of his dying fire. And the smell. Faint. Sharp. Out of place. Cigarette smoke. Daniel didn't smoke. Not out here. Not ever. Daniel didn't sleep that night. Every snap of a twig outside felt like it was just inches from the tent. He kept the flashlight gripped in one hand, the other resting near the small camping knife he had more for peeling fruit than defense. He kept telling himself it could have been anything. A raccoon. Maybe another camper passing through. But in his gut he knew better. Those footsteps were too heavy. Too even. Not a shuffle, not an animal. Someone was walking, deliberately. The sun finally crept over the ridge around 6 a.m., pale and gray. Daniel unzipped the tent, blinking against the cold morning air. The forest looked normal. Peaceful, even. The same as it had yesterday, only now it felt watched. He looked around the perimeter. No boot prints. No signs of another camp. But he still smelled it faintly, cigarette smoke, on the breeze. Like it had soaked into the trees. He tried to shake it off. Made instant coffee, reheated some breakfast, and forced himself to believe he was being paranoid. Sleep deprived. Maybe he'd dreamt the whole thing. But he couldn't stop glancing over his shoulder. By noon, he packed up most of his gear and decided to hike a little. Get his mind off things. There was an old game trail heading up a hill past the clearing. He followed it slowly, weaving through evergreens and low brush. No sounds but his boots, the wind, and once, a distant bird. He found a ridge about a mile up with a stunning view of the valley below. Trees stretching for miles, untouched. No cell signal. No houses. Just green. It should have been peaceful. But instead, standing there, Daniel felt exposed. Like someone was watching him from the trees behind. He turned. Nothing. Still, the feeling followed him all the way back to camp. When he returned, he noticed something strange. His tent zipper was halfway open. He was sure he had zipped it fully shut. He stepped closer. Knees locked. He reached forward and pulled it open. Inside, his sleeping bag was unrolled. Not how he left it. And on top of it, something small, white. A spent cigarette butt. Crushed. Right in the center of the bag. Daniel backed out of the tent slowly, holding the cigarette butt between two fingers like it might bite him. His first instinct was to scan the tree line, heart thumping against his ribs. But the forest stood still. Tall. Quiet. Unbothered. He hadn't seen a soul since he arrived. No other cars. No hikers. This place wasn't on any official map. So how the hell did someone find his tent? Get close enough to unzip it, leave something inside, and walk away without being seen or heard? He checked his car. Locked. Nothing stolen. Food supply? Still there. Knife? Still in his bag. But his toothbrush was gone. Just missing. He didn't care about the toothbrush. It was the message behind it. Someone had come into his camp. Entered his tent. Taken something personal and left a clear trace of themselves in return. Daniel shoved the cigarette into his jacket pocket, zipped the tent up tight, and built a bigger fire. Not for warmth, just to feel like he could push back the darkness when it came. The day dragged. He sat in his folding chair, trying to read, trying to pretend everything was fine. But his ears kept twitching at every snap in the brush. A crow landed in a branch nearby and stared at him too long. Even the trees felt like they were leaning in, eavesdropping. When night fell, it dropped hard. The fire crackled loud in the silence, throwing orange light against the nearby trees, but just beyond that ring of warmth, it was pitch black. At 9:12 p.m., he heard it again. Crunch. Then two more. But farther this time. Not near the tent, somewhere just past the tree line. Left side. Where the game trail had been. He stood, flashlight in hand, and shone it toward the sound. Trees. Branches. Nothing. He waited. 10 minutes later, crunch. This time from the right. Then again, from behind. It wasn't random. It was movement. Circling. Daniel turned in slow, tight steps, flashlights slicing through the dark. And that's when he heard something new. Not footsteps. Not branches. Whispers. Faint. Like someone speaking just under breath, a hiss of syllables he couldn't make out. It wasn't wind. It wasn't animals. It was voices. Low. Careful. Right at the edge of the light. He shouted. Hey! Silence. The whispers stopped. And then, from somewhere out in the dark, just once, he heard his name. Daniel. Daniel didn't sleep again. He sat upright by the fire, a blanket draped over his shoulders, the flashlight on his lap, eyes fixed on the black beyond the flames. The whisper, his name, had cut through the night like a knife, but nothing followed it. No movement. No reply. Just that awful knowing silence. At some point, the fire began to die. He didn't dare leave to gather more wood. Whatever was out there, it wanted him to move. It wanted to see what he'd do next. By morning, he was pale, eyes bloodshot, muscles tight from staying still too long. He stood finally, stretching, and made the decision he should have made yesterday. He had to leave. He packed quickly, shoved his sleeping bag and gear into the trunk. Tent last. As he bent to collapse it, something caught his eye. There were footprints. Not just his. Faint, but visible in the dirt and pine needles. Larger than his boots, deeper in the heel, like someone standing still, watching. The prints led back into the trees and disappeared beyond a fallen log. He hesitated. Then grabbed his phone. No service, but he turned on the camera, snapped a few pictures, and followed the direction of the tracks for maybe 30 feet. And that's when he saw it. Another tent. Not his. It was maybe 50 yards deeper into the woods, hidden between two thick trees, low and dirty, almost blending in with the earth. No markings. No logo. Just brown nylon stretched taut over a frame. Daniel stood still. There was no sign of life. No fire pit. No gear. Just the tent. The flap closed. He stepped closer. The hairs on his neck rose with every footfall. It smelled wrong. Like mildew and sweat and something else, metallic and sour. He crouched beside the entrance and called out. "Hello?" Nothing. He reached for the flap. His fingers stopped inches from it. Something moved inside. A rustle. A shift of weight. Not an animal. Breathing. Human. Daniel stumbled backward. He didn't wait. He turned and ran, tearing through branches, heart slamming against his chest. Back to the car. Threw the tent into the trunk half collapsed, climbed into the driver's seat, and slammed the door. He started the engine. The forest didn't fight him. No footsteps chased. No voices whispered. He drove fast, gravel spitting behind the tires, trees blurring past. And just as he reached the turn where the rusted mailbox stood, he looked in the rearview mirror. Someone was standing in the clearing. Not near his camp. Right where his tent had been. Still. Watching. Daniel didn't stop until he reached a small gas station nearly an hour down the mountain. His hands were shaking as he filled up, scanning the lot like he expected something to have followed him off the dirt roads. It was the kind of gas station that sold dusty beef jerky and had one broken pump. But there were people. Lights. A cashier. Safety, or the illusion of it. Inside, he grabbed a bottle of water and tried to act normal. "You all right, man?" the cashier asked. Daniel blinked at him. "Yeah. Just long night." He left it at that. He got back in his car and drove the final leg to Portland in silence. No music. No podcasts. Just the drone of the highway and the flicker of passing headlights. It wasn't until he pulled into his apartment's underground parking that he let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Home. 4 walls. A lock. Neighbors. He took a long shower. Turned on every light in the apartment. Ordered pizza. Slept with the TV on. By the next morning, the forest already felt far away, like something he could explain away as nerves and sleep deprivation. Almost. Except for the sound. It started that night. He was brushing his teeth when he heard it. Faint. Muffled. Coming from the hallway just outside his bathroom door. Crunch. Not like something falling. Like someone walking. He froze, toothpaste foaming in his mouth. Listened. Nothing. He stepped into a hallway, heart beginning to race. All the doors were closed. Front door still locked. No windows open. He shook his head. Told himself it was just apartment creaks. Settling. But the next night, it happened again. This time closer. Crunch. Like a footstep directly outside his bedroom. Then a whisper. Not a word. Just the hiss of a voice, too soft to understand but too sharp to ignore. He swung the door open. Nothing. He checked his locks. His closet. Under the bed. Everything was normal. Except it wasn't. That night, he dreamed of the forest. Of the second tent. And of a face. One he hadn't seen. Not clearly. But in the dream, it stood inches from his own, separated only by a layer of tent fabric. Smiling. Daniel started leaving lights on in every room. He wasn't proud of it, but it gave him the illusion of control. At night, he'd walk from room to room, double-checking locks, peering out through blinds, convinced something was just out of sight. Always just out of reach. 3 days passed since he got back from the woods. 3 nights of whispers. Crunching. The same breathy voice just outside his door. He recorded it once, set his phone to capture sound overnight, and placed it on his nightstand. The next morning, the file was still there. He played it back in bed, heartbeat steady until the 2:13 mark. That's when the whisper started again. But this time, it wasn't just hissing. It said one word. Unzip. Daniel dropped the phone. That morning, he stayed in bed until noon. Afraid to move. Afraid to hear it again. Eventually, hunger forced him out. He threw on a hoodie, went to the kitchen, and grabbed cereal. He wasn't eating right. Wasn't working. The real world felt like it had blurred at the edges. He opened the fridge. Stopped. Right there on the middle shelf, between a bottle of orange juice and a half-full carton of milk, was a cigarette. One cigarette. Bent slightly, like it had been smoked halfway. He slammed the fridge shut and backed away. His apartment door was still locked. No windows were open. He lived on the 3rd floor. No balconies. No fire escape. He hadn't smoked a day in his life. Daniel didn't touch the cigarette. He left it there, closed the fridge, and stood in the middle of his apartment trying not to come undone. How long had someone been in his place? Were they still here? He pulled his phone out and called the police. That's when he noticed something else. The last photo he'd taken, the one of the footprints near the tent, was gone from his gallery. So was the one of the second tent. And the audio file he recorded during the night? Deleted. He never deleted them. His fingers trembled as he opened the trash folder. Empty. He stood motionless for what felt like an hour, phone in one hand, heart crawling up his throat. He didn't call the police. He already knew what they'd say. There was no break-in. Nothing stolen. No proof. Just a cigarette. And the sound of someone walking slowly across the ceiling above him. Except, he was on the top floor. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat upright on his couch with every light on, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The footsteps had stopped around 3 a.m., but the silence that followed was worse. He felt like he was being held in place, like if he moved, even to blink, something would notice. By sunrise, the illusion of safety came back. He stood, joints stiff, and grabbed his keys. He had to get out. But when he opened the front door, there was something on the floor. A single pine needle. Right on the welcome mat. He stared at it for a long time. Not a leaf. Not lint. A pine needle. He picked it up slowly, turned it between his fingers, and suddenly remembered his boots. He'd never cleaned them after leaving the forest. They were still in the closet, caked in mud and pine. He checked them. Both pairs were gone. Just missing. Daniel packed a duffel bag with some clothes and his laptop. He didn't care if it looked paranoid. He needed a hotel. Somewhere with cameras, a front desk, people. He didn't hear anything strange on the way out. The hallway was quiet. The elevator worked. But as he stepped onto the street, a passing car made him flinch. He checked into a mid-range hotel downtown by noon. 4th floor. Clean. No trees. He locked the door. Put a chair under the knob. Sat on the bed, and tried to feel safe again. For a while it worked. Until he went to brush his teeth. He unzipped his toiletry bag and found something tucked between his razor and deodorant. Not a cigarette this time. A matchbook. Old. Faded. He turned it over. There was a logo. One he didn't recognize, but it was clear. 2 Pines Campgrounds. He didn't book a site through any campground. He found that clearing himself. He had wandered in blind, followed a trail that wasn't on a map. There wasn't supposed to be a campground. But the matchbook was there, in his bag, folded neatly shut. And when he opened it, only one match was missing. He threw it in the trash. Went back to the bed. Sat down. But then noticed something else. The room smelled faintly of smoke. Not like cigarettes. Campfire. And beneath that, something even worse. The scent of unwashed fabric. Of sweat. Of someone having lived in this room before him, recently. He stood up. Checked the closet. Nothing. Checked under the bed. His missing hiking boots were sitting side by side on the carpet. Mud still wet on the soles. Daniel didn't remember taking the boots. He couldn't have. He was sure they were in his closet back at the apartment. But here they were, wet, dirty, and still smelling faintly of pine, sitting at the foot of his hotel bed like they'd walked there themselves. He left the room without taking anything. He didn't check out. He didn't speak to the front desk. He just walked. Through the city. Through people. Through noise. For a brief moment, surrounded by strangers, the grip loosened. No trees. No shadows. Just normal life all around him. He called his friend Mason. He hadn't spoken to him in months, not since the move. Mason answered on the second ring. "You okay?" Mason asked immediately. "I need a place to crash." There was a pause. Then, "Come over." Mason's place was a condo out in Beaverton, clean and modern and surrounded by concrete. Daniel explained everything, or most of it. The forest. The second tent. The cigarette. The boots. He expected disbelief. But Mason didn't laugh. Instead, he said, "You look like hell, man." That night, Daniel slept on a couch that didn't creak, under a ceiling that didn't whisper. For the first time in days, he closed his eyes without fear. Until 3:12 a.m. He woke with a start. Mason was asleep in his room. Daniel sat up, heart thudding. It was the silence that got him this time. Too perfect. Too still. And then, the tap. A single, slow tap from the window behind the couch. 4th floor. He turned his head. There, just past the sheer curtains, something moved. A shape. Not a person exactly, a silhouette. Still. Waiting. He didn't move. Didn't breathe. Another tap. Then a whisper. Closer than the glass? It came from inside the room. Just 2 words. "You left." Daniel turned on every light. Ran to Mason's door. Knocked fast, borderline panicked. Mason opened it, groggy, eyes narrowing at the fear on Daniel's face. "What happened?" "Someone was at the window." They checked. Nothing. No prints. No sign of forced entry. But when Daniel went back to the couch, something was different. His duffel bag, which he'd left zipped, was now open. And sitting right on top was the matchbook. Same one. Only now 2 matches were missing. Daniel didn't sleep the rest of the night. He stayed seated on the edge of the couch, eyes on the duffel bag, waiting for something else to move. Mason left for work at 8 a.m., offering his place for as long as Daniel needed it. But Daniel couldn't stay. Not after the window. Not after the second missing match. He needed answers. He opened his laptop and started digging. He searched everything: campground records, satellite images, hiker forums, missing persons in the region. Hours passed. Then he found something. A thread from 2 years ago, buried deep in an old backpacking forum. The title was simple: "Unregistered campsite near Dead Pine Trail, avoid at all costs." Daniel clicked. There were only 3 posts. The original one was from a user named Trail Goes 7. They described finding a small clearing just west of Dead Pine Ridge, exactly where Daniel had camped. Same slope. Same tree formation. Same feeling of being watched. They mentioned seeing a second tent. But not getting close to it. Because something was breathing inside. The next post was from another user, just saying, "I know that place. Burn it if you can." The third was a broken reply. Only a few words. "You unzip it. It unzips you." Daniel leaned back in his chair. His blood ran cold. He tried to message the user. The profile was inactive. TrailGhost7 hadn't posted anything else since that thread. And then, while staring at the screen, Daniel heard a soft metallic click from the other side of the apartment. He turned slowly. The front door was unlocked. He hadn't touched it. His skin prickled. He grabbed his phone and backed into the kitchen. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. He edged toward the hallway. Every light was on. Still, there was a shadow that didn't belong, right outside the bathroom. He raised his phone to snap a picture. It was all he could think to do. But before he could press the button, the bathroom door creaked open. No one was there. Just darkness. And on the bathroom mirror, in the steam that hadn't been there seconds ago, words had formed. "You were never alone." Daniel stared at them, heart slamming against his ribs. Then he heard it again, barely a whisper. But not from the mirror. From the duffel bag behind him. Something inside was unzipping. Daniel's hands trembled as he slowly turned around, eyes fixed on the duffel bag on the floor. The zipper was moving, slowly, deliberately, unzipping itself inch by inch as if pulled by an invisible hand. The room chilled instantly, the air thick with a cold that wasn't natural. He wanted to run, scream, anything. But his legs felt rooted to the spot. The zipper reached the bottom of the bag. The bag gave a soft sigh, like the breath of something alive. Then it stopped. A shadow slipped out, long and thin, twisting toward the ceiling. The shape was human, but distorted, flickering in and out like smoke. Daniel barely dared to blink. "Why are you here?" he whispered, voice cracking. The shadow didn't answer. Instead, it moved closer. And then, the voice came. Low, almost a growl. "Because you left us." Images flashed in Daniel's mind, the second tent, the forgotten campers, the ones who never came back. Their stories lost in the woods, swallowed by shadows. They had been waiting for him. Waiting for someone to remember. He backed away, the shadow following. Desperate, he grabbed his phone and opened the flashlight app, shining the beam directly at it. The shadow recoiled, letting out a scream that rattled his bones. Daniel ran for the door, heart pounding, lungs burning. Outside, the morning sun was breaking over the trees. He never went back. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, he hears the whisper of the forest. The crunch of footsteps in the dark. And he knows that the second tent is still there.